I love my lighting. When I came to my uncle, Chicago was like paradise. It was his mental Narnia. He often chatted about how those years in the Windy City affected him. A young Puerto Rican man, single, riding his motorbike and cohorting. Damn, I love when I try to use a big word badly. With Latinos from across the world. In perspective, I see he was talking about freedom, which is what we all wanted from the very family that chained us. My uncle was the miserable patriarch of a family that gaslit itself into believing singing, dancing, laughing, and cooking well are the only sources to joy, in part because that is what we did best. Yet we had a fifth and sixth marker, fighting and ill-wishing, that was so powerful it could dominate the other attributes. He was showing pictures of his time in Chicago and called over his kids to see them, of which I followed. He asked, "Which one am I?" and they had no clue. He simultaneously grimaced and smirked. You know, like that Daenerys Targaryen meme? Like, come on, which one? They did not care, but I stepped up and said, "This one." He laughed, but was slightly disappointed it was me. "Yep, can you believe it? I had long hair," he replied. He looked puro taino, built, tan, hair past his shoulder blades, and honestly, I was shocked he was so handsome. My family was what I like to call pretty tired. They were not ugly, but they looked like a weird blend of young for their age / beaten down and slightly sad. It was the same dynamic I noted in my own father's features. Genetics had protected him by making him handsome and look younger than his age, but life oddly made him look tired and lost. Forever bright his smile, he had no direction beyond the quiet plots of malice he had against the people that loved him, and making sure they had no direction too, along with having a huge sexual and drug addiction that he used to pacify, that deep down he too hated, that he was more genuinely evil. And he had to lie to even be close to looking like a good man. All right, I digress. My uncle launched into a joyous retelling of his life in Chicago. He was so proud and jubilant. I was right there with him, imagining the concrete snow and the boys' club that he defined as his friends for life. He looked beyond me as if for the first time in decades he received oxygen. There was breathiness to how he spoke that made me witness the haggard man in front of me was actually that happy, handsome man. I went to the kitchen to grab a Snapple, and his mother and wife were there. He was talking about Chicago again. They chided, smirking with an eye roll. His mom was a known bruja, and she was proud of her next statement. "I did so much brujeria to get him back. He cannot be over there. It's dangerous. And also, why?" It was the why part that stuck out to me, because why not? He was happy. It was the same reaction my mother would have when I confronted her on how much she stops me from pursuing my own dreams of singing and acting, even saying, "I just think you're too smart." The truth is, we were raised to be our parents' partner, and they could not imagine or allow us to find happiness somewhere else, away from them. Hence, they cut our dreams, or at least pressured us to do so, until we ended up older, looking at pictures of the past and wondering why we did not fight more for a happier future. It was on a period of visiting his family from Chicago that his mother set him up with his wife that eventually would accuse him of stopping her dreams. Still, it would be years that, despite knowing my family's bitterness and seeing the roots of it, I would realize that is why we were never happy with each other. We never allowed each other to be happy without the other. With how much in common my father's family had to my mother's, I wondered if perhaps that is why my father was demonically selfish, stealing from his wives and clients, committing fraud and identity theft, and abandoning his kids like he was abandoning his empty wallet. He always felt family held you back from your joy. The problem is he just became a walking misery, seeking occasional companions. All right, let's heal, let's discuss. So my uncle was like my father growing up. He was probably one of, if not the most important father figure of my life. And we had a weird relationship because he loved that I loved him. But it highlighted that his children didn't. They were very disconnected to him. And I think it's because my family, was very emotionally overwhelming, particularly that sector of the family, because we were big, but everybody was divided in groups, like to each his own child. And my mother kind of didn't pick that up. She kind of tossed her own child and tried to, accumulate points by being good to other people's children. And it never really worked because when you're the daughter of a black sheep, they don't like you as much as they don't like your parent. And we were the black sheep of the family. And it was weird because I think he felt I saw him, and that only made him question why his children didn't. They were rather cold. But that side of the family was very materialistic. I'll pay you to love me. And he called us over, and he really called them, and I was like right there with him. And he said, "Which one am I?" And they had absolutely no clue. And it was, I think for me, when I saw his picture, he was young and he was handsome, and I think he was like 19 or 23, like in his early 20s. That's when he went to Chicago. And I was like, I know it's you, but it's not you. Like, it was him, but it was not him. He was handsome, he was healthy, he was happy, he was glowing. And he felt a little disappointed that I pointed it out. And then his kids left, and he started talking about Chicago. And it was such a vulnerable moment he shared with me. I loved it. And he was going off about how happy he was. And I went to go get a Snapple, which turns out to be one of my favorite drinks. I don't know why. I didn't know I had so many Snapples. And his mom and his wife are there. And my aunt was my great aunt rather, was a very well-known bruja. And she was very proud of it. And she goes, like they kind of dismissed it. There he goes off about Chicago, although it was the first time I was listening to it. And she goes, I did so much brujeria to bring him back. And I kind of was like, two things happened to me. I didn't know, I was a kid, so I was like, you could do that? Like, you could manipulate futures with magic and energy. And in perspective, I think my family could be very domineering and very guilt-trippy. And they had this dualistic notion that I think my father scammed people, but he absolved himself of guilt by saying, you fell into the trap. I set it up, but you fell into it. And my mother's family had a similar dynamic in terms of, I may have pressured you, but you fell into pressure. I just said Chicago's extremely dangerous. You could be unhappy. You are all alone. You should come be with your family. We'll protect you. We'll prosper you. I just said that, and you came. I didn't take you from Chicago. And I think that made processing our feelings with each other really, really hard, because we wanted to pressure each other. We wanted to hurt each other. And when we actually did, we blamed the victim for being hurt. And my father ran on that MO, which is why I'm not surprised he made my mother a victim. It was her family, like that dynamic of, again, I set up the trap, but you fall into it. And that's on you. Take some accountability. And I'm not a Trappist. You're just a faller. And it was one of my uncle was what people would call a rencoroso. Very angry, very volatile, very funny. But he was a yo-yo. He was either like the most hilarious guy in a room or like yelling, like upset. And it was one of the moments, rare moments in our relationship, or really his relationship with anybody, where he just showed a different emotion and like nostalgia and joy and sweetness. And I felt really, really bad for him, because they made fun of him reminiscing. And mind you, I opened a door. He would mention Chicago 20 million times after that. But they acted like they won something. They won him. Meanwhile, they complained that he was bitter. And it's, I think, I can't imagine being his wife and him discussing the happiest moment of his life before he had her and she had their kids. Like he's talking about this was it. This was the moment. I should have never left. He even said that. I should have never left. I should have stayed. I should have just continued my journey. But I didn't. This one was calling me all the time, his mother. And she absolved herself. She was like, I didn't. Even though she admitted she did everything to bring him back, seeing his unhappiness, she absolved herself from that. And that's the weird thing, the dynamic that my father encompassed. I did everything to make you miserable. But once I see you miserable, I say I didn't. and I throw it back on you. And I think seeing how miserable my families were, both sides, and how cruel that made them, has only made me more determined to do daddy recovery and to do my dreams. Because we really do only have one life, and all of them wasted it. Check out daddyrecovery.com. Check out Hardín on all music platforms.